that this method is a very effective method to get the message, the core message of Islam across to non-Muslims, especially if you have maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes with them, right? Because normally when you're in a street dawah situation, chances are most of the conversations you have, they're not going to go on for an hour or 2 hours, right? You're only going to have a limited time. So what we want to do is we want to make the most of that time and make sure that at the very least, that non-Muslim leaves understanding those core principles of Islam. They understand who God is, they understand the oneness of Allah, Tawheed, which is very important. You know, most people out there today may believe in God already, right? They may have some sort of idea of God. You know, we'll be surprised, many of us think most people are atheists out there, when reality is they don't, right? They have some sort of belief, right? But where we need to do the work is on the oneness in most cases. So clarifying Tawheed to them, making them understand that Allah is uniquely one. You know, that there aren't many gods, or parts to God, or gods with partners or anything like that. There's only one God, right? So oneness, and then obviously revelation ties in because they need to understand that the Quran is the final word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? It's the final revelation. And then finally, again, as important, they need to understand who the final messenger is. You know, that completes the shahada for people. So they know who the Prophet ﷺ was. We establish through the sort of training how to prove prophethood effectively in a very short space of time. And then once they know this information, then at the very least, if they've spent enough time with you, say they've spent a half an hour, 40 minutes, they've asked some questions, then at that time, we want to bring them to a position where they... Yes, sure, no problem, inshallah. So we want to get them to a position where they are now ready to make a decision. Sometimes they won't be, right? They'll need more time, which is fine. In that case, you take the number and you stay in touch with them. But sometimes you'll find people are ready, because these are the core basics, right? The rest, people can continue learning about Islam as life goes on. Everyone's learning. But as long as they know enough information to help them make a conclusion and be ready to take the Shahada if they're willing and they're ready. That's what we're trying to achieve, inshallah, right? So that's what the course is going to cover. Just some preliminary notes, so we don't need to worry about that, I'll cover that. So just a couple of notes before we start. It's a foundational course, there's no deep philosophical discussion in this course, right? We will be sharing arguments with you, simple rational arguments, right? But there's no deep philosophical discussion. And just a note on that, brothers, look, reality is you don't need philosophy to establish Islam with people, yeah? It's philosophy, logic, reason, these are all tools, right? Most people in the environment in the world today, especially in the West, they're into science, right? Seeing is believing for them. They like rationality, they like proofs, evidences. So it's a tool that we use, right? Because of the nature and the mindset of people out there. But it's not the case that we need logic, reason, philosophy to establish the truth of Islam, right? The Quran, most people, and I can tell you this from experience, many people that accept Islam today, it's not because they spoke to someone or they went on a philosophical course or looked through 100 arguments for God's existence. It's because they've just picked up the Quran, they've read the Quran in translation and it makes sense to them. They accept Islam, right? Majority of the people are like that. Or the other case is, they have friends that are Muslim, they've grown up with Muslims, they've had interactions with Muslims, they've spoken to them, and over the years, that's cumulative, it's built up, and then they make an informed decision about Islam, right? So, that being said, this is a powerful tool. So at the very least, once you've had the interaction with a non-Muslim, you've set them up now. So when they go away, even if they don't become Muslim, you've set them up in a very solid way, inshallah. And you've spoken to them in a way that appeals to them. Right? So although there be logical arguments we share, there's not a philosophical course. Prerequisites, a good grounding in the basics of Islam, that's something that we should all have. Right? And this is the very basics, and we'll touch upon them as we go along. Dawah is worship and requires sincerity and correct action. And again, we'll touch upon that as well, inshallah. So that's primarily what I'm going to be covering in the first sort of 30, 40 minutes or so, inshallah, with you guys, right? So these are refreshers, things that we already know, but we're going to sort of see how they come together when it comes to giving dawah, inshallah, and how important these things are. So let me start with the question, what is dawah? What would you guys say dawah is? What does that mean to you?
Calling non-Muslims towards Islam.
Calling non-Muslims to Islam. Okay, that's a good starting point. So let's be more specific.
Calling Muslims to the proper Islam.
Okay, so calling Muslims, advising Muslims to the correct Islam, to practice Islam, to understand it. Yes? But how can we go and now understand this further? Da'wah, what does that mean? Let's be more specific.
To call.
To call, okay. If we yes.
Would it be like to relay an accurate representation of what it means to be a Muslim, like for our actions as well as what we teach?
Okay, so an accurate representation of Islam, that's what we need to call to. But let's be a bit more specific. When we're saying giving da'wah from an Islamic perspective, right? Because we know the word da'wah, it's been transported into other languages. You have it in Bengali, you have it in Urdu, Punjabi, dawat, right? That's how we say it. We know what that means. But let's think about that first. What is a dawat?
Calling to oneness of God, to worship Him alone.
Yes.
Exclusively.
Perfect. So that's what we're really talking about. When we're talking about giving da'wah from an Islamic perspective, is to call people to not only recognize that Allah exists, but fundamentally that He created us to worship Him. Right? It's calling people back to the worship of their Creator. And in other words, it's calling people back to fulfilling the purpose of their life. Because what does Allah tell us in the Quran? وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. That Allah did not create the jinn kind and mankind for no other reason except to worship Him. So that's what we need to focus on. Because a lot of the times when you see the da'wah online, who's seen Speaker's Corner videos? Couple of us, yeah? Yeah. And a lot of it's entertainment, right? We watch it. There's some things we learn from those videos as well, some arguments. But what you'll find seldom happening is that the call to worship, right? A lot of times in a da'wah today, especially on social media, we are informing people about Islam, we're telling them about Allah, we're proving that God exists, but we leave it at that. Right? We don't even tell people, like, you can convince someone God exists, and that's it, and they'll go about believing in God, but they'll keep living the way they're living. Right? That's not actually them fulfilling the purpose of their life. The full picture is, number one, recognize God exists. But number two, now what does that mean? That means you have to also recognize that He created you for a purpose. What is that purpose? He created you to worship Him. Right? What does worship mean? Then you can break it down further. Worship means to obey Allah. And why do you obey Allah? You obey Allah out of love for Allah. How do you gain love for Allah? It's through knowledge. Right? So you can then further break this down. But the key thing is we're calling people, humanity, back to worshipping their Creator. That's what we're doing when we're giving da'wah. And it's important to understand that distinction because we want to be comprehensive. We don't want to just leave people with knowledge which doesn't lead them to fulfilling why they were the purpose of the creation, which is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, some reasons as to why we need to give da'wah, we don't need to go into this in detail. We already know this stuff. The general picture of Islam, especially over the past couple of decades in the media, has not been overall a positive one, right? When people think about Islam, and if all of the information comes from the media, TV, some websites online, then you can assume that it's quite negative, right? Even if there's some good things said, a lot of it's going to be negative, right? Most people out there in Leicester, especially, as far as I'm aware, because there's a big Muslim majority or population, not majority, but population in Leicester, alhamdulillah, inshallah, they've interacted with Muslims and a lot of their minds have been changed, hopefully. But even then, in the back of their mind, they have some of this negative bias, right? There's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of misinformation, which prevents people from even researching about Islam or looking into Islam further, right? But when the reality is, if you look at the people in the West, one of the biggest crises of the West is that people have lost meaning, right? They don't know what the meaning of life is, right? They're just living hedonistic, materialist lifestyles, buying what they want, trying to get, the promotions at their jobs, just working their way up in that material realm. But in reality, deep down, they're looking for something, right? They want answers. And this is why you'll see many people in the West today now, they're moving away from atheism and they are starting to practice these new age, they're joining these new age spiritual movements, right? They're almost wanting to practice spirituality. You have Scientology and all of these different now new religions that are coming about, right? Some people are turning to Buddhism again, right? So they want to be spiritual, they're looking for something more, but they don't have the answers. And unfortunately, they're not looking at Islam because of all of this stuff out there, right? They don't even consider Islam to be an option. So we want to change that, and there's a need for da'wah. So the importance of da'wah. Without looking at the slide too much, right? What do you guys think the importance of da'wah is? Why is da'wah important to you? Why should we as Muslims be engaging in the da'wah, aside from the fact that there's misrepresentations and people have these ideas about Islam?
Is it like a legitimate reason for us to be here? Otherwise, we don't really have any purpose to be here.
Okay, good. So, a scholarly opinion is that one of the things that justifies you being in a non-Muslim majority context, especially I would argue from a 21st century perspective, which is very secular, irreligious, godless, is to give da'wah, right? What else? What other reasons? Why is dawah
It is a
important?
duty of every Muslim to give dawah.
Duty of every Muslim. I want to explore that a bit further. Is that what you were going to say, Sheikh Rizal?
Same.
Okay. So listening, what do you mean by duty? Why is it duty for every
This
Muslim?
nation has been bestowed by the, the ayat of Quran about, enjoying the good and forbidding the evil. And in that frame, enjoying the good, actually is the dawah, is the calling people to Tawheed. It's an order from Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So basically we are the last nation which will inform, basically the dawah was prescribed as many other acts, on the Jews. They didn't fulfill the mission and they keep the religion for themselves and they introduce other items to the religion and including usury. So what happened, obviously the Rasul comes as a final messenger with the message of Tawheed, of oneness, which is message for all of mankind, regardless of the country or board. And this message we've been bestowed as a sunnah, because actually the Prophet he lives with the dawah all his life as calling, and we are actually people who claim to follow the sunnah. So that's what most important, the Sahaba as well, they engage in dawah, So we are actually fulfilling the duties of Islam. Actually we're saving our lives as well, because obviously every person who will become a Muslim, his life is saved, and amazing reward. So it's beauty and the reward at the same time.
Exactly. Some very important points. It's a duty. It was the way of the prophets. That was their job, right? Yes, brother.
Islam has two criteria. Different. First, excuse me for my broken English.
No, we can understand you clearly, Sheikh. Carry on, please.
Islam has two criteria, which is not present in any other religion. First one is that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is the last prophet. He's a seal of prophets and messengers.
Yes.
So no prophet will come after him. The second thing is that every prophet was sent to his own people. But Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is sent to all mankind.
Yes.
So, and this religion is to all mankind. It will not be spread to all people except with those who follows Muhammad ﷺ. And it is said in Surah Yusuf, قل هذه سبيلي أدعو إلى الله على بصيرة أنا ومن اتبعني. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that this is my way. I call to Allah inside me, and those who follow me, we are who follows him.
Yes.
So it is a must for us to practice that.
So very important points. He was the final messenger, and he was a messenger sent to all of mankind. And if we claim to be the followers of the Prophet, peace be upon him, who did da'wah, like this was his life, right? He called people to Islam. And if we claim to follow in his footsteps, recognizing that there's no more messengers to come, and that the Prophet ﷺ encouraged us to give da'wah. Right? Even in the last sermon, the Prophet ﷺ said to share this message with those that are not present here. Right? And throughout the Quran, who can give me something from the Quran? Yes. Yeah.
Then
so you've been raised as the best of nations. But why? What qualifies that? We think, yes, we're the best of nations, khalas, that's it. Carry on doing what we're doing. But what qualifies it? Yes, Sheikh.
كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. عند سورة النساء ومن أحسن قولا ممن دعا إلى الله وعمل صالحا وقال إنني من المسلمين.
And who is better in speech than the one who calls to Allah? Yeah. So Allah is telling us here that whenever there's a rhetorical device in the Quran where Allah asks a question, like who is better in speech, what's been implied is that there is no one better, right? But Allah is asking the question so we think about it, so we come to that conclusion. And Allah is telling us here that there is no one better in speech than the one who calls to Allah. So there's no better use of speech, which we use all the time, right? We communicate all the time, we speak all the time, right? For example, if I asked you guys here right now, who could tell me right now, since the moment you woke up this morning till now, how many times have you spoken? Who can give me a figure that I spoke 4 times this morning, or 5 times, or 10 times? Who could tell me that? No one can, right? Why? Because it's something that's so natural, so easy, and we do it all the time. But we don't really consider or think about the fact that it's a huge blessing, speech itself, right? Humans have intelligent speech, bayan, right? Other creatures, they communicate, but they don't have speech like us. But we just use it and use it and use it. We're not even conscious of how we're using it. And Allah is telling us that the best use of speech, the best people in speech are those who do what? Call to Allah. Right? So this is another big motivator for all of us, inshallah. Anything else? Yes, brother.
Among you, the people, the group of people,
Yes.
I forget the ayah. Among you, in the group of the people, in the group, you'll call the people.
Yeah, to let there be a group of people amongst you that
Yes,
raised to do
exactly.
this work. So this again, it's a qualifier. The thing is that Allah is telling us you are the best of nation because you enjoy the good and you forbid the evil. You know, not because you're just Muslim and you just focus on practicing and doing your own thing personally. You know, so there's an aspect of Islam that's been highlighted here, which is it's not just a selfish thing. Which okay, I accept Islam, I do my salah, I do my. Those things are those are the foundations. Those are what build you. But you have a role to play within society as well. You know, that's what defines it. That's what the Sahaba did. You know, why is it the case if we think about it? They were in the most blessed place on earth, right? But what they did was they traveled all across the earth and you find their graves all over the world today. Why is that the case? Why did they travel? What did they go for? They traveled to deliver the message of Islam, to carry the message of Islam to other people, to other human beings. So it's extremely important. And you know another interesting point, you'll find that who are the most active? What religion would you say is the most active in missionary work? Christians. Straight away we know, right? We have Christians knocking our doors, you have Christians having tables on every street, you have different sects of Christians, Jehovah's Witnesses everywhere, right? But what's interesting is if you look at their texts, their foundational source texts, they are not by source a missionary religion. And there's books written by scholars on this as to how did Christianity become a missionary religion, right? It's not a part of their texts. Yet in Islam, there is a clear derivative, there's a clear call by Allah to us to go and call others, to tell others, to call people to Islam, to inform people of this message. You know, but in reality, when we're seeing the Muslims are not giving dawah, they're not focused on the dawah, they're not worried. But the Christians are out there just giving their message to everyone, all over the world. You know, so we have to catch up. We have to do it not because we're copying them, but because it's in our tradition. It's there. You know, throughout the Quran. I mean, who's memorized Surah Ikhlas, for example? Everyone, right? That's one of the first surahs we memorize, right? How does Surah Ikhlas begin? Qul huwallahu ahad. Qul huwallahu ahad. What's the first word? Qul. What does that mean? Say, tell them, right? It's there. You know, but we don't focus on that. We just read, okay, Allah is uniquely one. But Allah is telling you, say Allah is uniquely one. Proclaim it, declare it to people. Right? So it's very important we understand these things, brothers and sisters. Another thing is, very important thing is connecting with the Quran. You know, we want to connect with the Quran, right? We want to understand the Quran, we want to feel the Quran, but a lot of the Quran, at least a third of the Quran, one could argue, is the stories of the prophets. Now, what are the stories of the prophets about? When we read the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, or Musa alayhi salam, or Nuh alayhi salam, what are their stories about? Does Allah focus on how they prayed, how they fasted, you know, how they gave charity, or does Allah tell us about what? What does Allah tell us about?
Dawah.
How they gave da'wah. Their challenges in the da'wah, their obstacles, how they overcame them, how the people treated them. Now, if we want to connect with this part of the Quran, really connect with it, what do we have to do? We have to experience the da'wah for ourselves. You know, and we're not going to go through what the prophets went through. Especially in the West today, it's very easy. You're not going to disappear, and no one's going to, beat you up. It doesn't happen in most cases here. You know, we're in a very controlled environment. It's very easy, and there's more the reason to give da'wah and not to hold back, inshallah. So, a couple of things, additional things. It's also fundamentally to seek the pleasure of Allah. Yeah, we're acting upon what Allah has told us to do, and we're seeking the pleasure of Allah. Allah has ordered us to do it, and we know the Prophet ﷺ, has encouraged us. Throughout the hadith literature, we find narrations which encourage us to give da'wah. For example, a very common one that we're all aware of is convey from me, even if it's one ayah. Right? Now, just a point on this, because there's sometimes a bit of confusion in regards to this. You'll find a spectrum of Muslims. On one end of the spectrum, there's two extremes. One end of the spectrum, you'll find brothers who will tell you just give da'wah, don't worry about knowledge. The Prophet ﷺ said, convey from me even if it's one ayah, just go and give da'wah, don't worry about knowledge. And on the other end of the spectrum, you'll find people that say, no, you're not supposed to give da'wah. The da'wah is for only a select group of people who have a certain caliber of knowledge. Right? And there's no definition in regards to what that caliber is. right? It's the middle path when it comes to the da'wah, right? Which is give da'wah, but speak about things that you know and you understand, right? Don't speak about things that you don't know. Because what's going to end up happening, and I can again tell you this from years of experience, when brothers start to talk about things they don't know about in the da'wah, and you'll see this happening in Speaker's Corner a lot now, when they start talking about things they don't know about, people can tell. One, they'll contradict themselves. They'll say one thing in 1 minute, the next minute they'll say something which completely contradicts what they said a few minutes ago. They'll come across unconfident. They'll come across unsure of themselves. They will stutter. And all of these cues, this body language and the way they're speaking, people can pick up on it. They'll know this guy's making this up. He's not sure of this. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And that's just going to add to the negativity about Muslims. Oh, these guys make things up. They lie as well. Right? And a Muslim can be everything, but he can't be what? He can't be a liar. Right? That's the last thing we want people to think about Muslims now. So you're going to be doing more damage, because the notion is, if I don't give this person the answer, they're going to go away confused. They're not going to know. So I have to give them an answer in the da'wah. No, you don't. Trust me, if you don't know something, just say you don't know. Just tell them, non-Muslim, if they ask you a question you don't know, say, sorry, I don't know the answer. But I can try find out for you. Right? Give me your details, I'll find out for you. Have that humility in the da'wah is very important. And if anything, that's going to have more of a positive impact on that person. Because they're going to be like, these guys are humble. Today, everyone knows everything. Everyone's an expert on everything. Right? Everyone likes to talk about everything. But these guys, if they don't know something, they say they don't know. Right? So it's a very important principle. Stick to what you know in the da'wah, inshallah. And that also gives us more reason to learn more as well. In the da'wah, you get asked a question, you don't know the answer, what do? Make a note of it. Tell them you don't know, try to ask someone that knows, get them the information, but you make a note of it yourself, so you go away and you learn that subject or that topic. So it gives you a reason to study and continue to learn. And over time you realize there's only so many questions non-Muslims ask. Right? And you'll be able to, inshallah, over time gain the knowledge to be able to address those questions. But at the time, if you don't know, just say you don't know. I'm going to skip some of these slides, but I'm deliberately doing that, inshallah. There's no additional things there. So some rewards for giving da'wah. As you guys have mentioned already, who is better in speech than the one who calls to Allah, does righteousness and says, indeed, I am of the Muslims. Hassan al-Basri, he said, this person is the beloved to Allah, the wali of Allah, and is the most beloved to him from amongst the people of the earth. He answered the call of Allah and invited the people to the very same call he responded to. He works righteous deeds within his response and declares, indeed, I am of the Muslims. Right? So this is a very noble work, brothers and sisters. And the thing to keep in mind is, as great as this work is, we have to ensure that if we're going to be partaking in the da'wah, we have to be responsible as well. And a part of the responsibility is stick to what you know. It's not about winning debates or an argument or coming out on top of the discussion. Right? That's not what the da'wah is about. Right? The da'wah is about, like we said, calling people back to the worship of their Creator. Right? You are simply there to deliver a message. Guidance is in the hands of Allah. Your job isn't to just win that discussion and look like the big person at the end of it. Right? Your job is to deliver the message. If they are, whatever they're doing, whatever they're saying, if they don't want to talk, then fine, let them be. You just make sure that you just stick to your lane, as they say. Another very powerful, thing to reflect upon. We know the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that whoever guides another to a good deed will get a reward similar to the one he performs. So this is a very powerful principle to keep in mind as well, is that you're calling people to Allah. That is the greatest thing. That's the most fundamental thing. Say they become Muslim with you, inshallah. They accept Islam. Technically, everything they do after that, and as they progress, and another thing is taking care of these new Muslims, which we'll touch upon at the end, but everything they do after that, inshallah, you'll be getting the rewards for that as well. Right? The Prophet ﷺ also mentioned that if Allah guides one person through you, it is better for you than a whole host of red camels, in the plural. And in another narration, it's better for you than everything on the surface of this earth. Right? If you think about this now, essentially what the Prophet, peace be upon him, is communicating to us is if Allah guides one person through you, that is better for you than anything in the dunya, anything in this world, anything you can imagine. Guaranteed it is better for you. And if we really understand this and internalize this, our goal should be, brothers, to just make sure that, number one, that we're sincere. because we want this reward. And that reward is only going to come to us if we're sincere. And then that we keep certain things in mind, which we're going to cover now, inshallah. So when it comes to the fiqh of dawah, just a couple of things to focus on. What is the focus of the call? We've already said this, but let's reiterate this. What is the focus of the call? Yes. And?
Oneness of Allah. Yeah.
Oneness of Allah?
Yes.
Leading to what? Worship. Yeah. Clarifying who Allah is and then calling people to the worship of Allah. So let's go on. The call is with basira. This is another very key point, and we need to reiterate this again. And the ayah, as it said in the ayah, say, O Prophet, this is my way, I invite to Allah with insight. I and those who follow me, glory be to Allah, and I am not of the polytheists. Right? So it's very important. The call is with insight. Don't speak about things you don't know about. Right? Only communicate things that you know about. And alhamdulillah, as we're going to see when we go through the go-wrap, the things we need to focus on in the dawah, the things we need to communicate are things we already know as Muslims. Who is Allah? Why is Allah one? Uniquely one. What is the Quran? Who was the Prophet ﷺ? These are things we already know. We're just going to learn a way of articulating these things to non-Muslims. But it's knowledge you already have. Right? And this is why everyone could be giving dawah in their own way. Most Muslims, I would say, can give dawah. Right? Barring maybe certain cases, but most Muslims can, because the dawah is to focus on those fundamentals. It's not about teaching someone the fiqh of fasting. Because there are people out there that are interested in specifics of Islam. Right? Some people want to learn, oh, you guys fast in Ramadan for a month. How does that work? What do you guys do? When do you stop eating? When do you start eating? And all the details. They want to know, they're interested. But fundamentally, that's not the dawah. Right? Imagine this scenario. You speak to someone on a table for an hour, and they're interested in fasting, and you tell them the breakdown of how fasting works. You start eating at this time, you stop eating at this time. There may be two different opinions in regards to what time you stop eating in the morning, blah, blah, all of these things. You cover all of this with them. And say they leave after this, right? And say on the way home they get hit by a bus and they die. In the grand scheme of things, are they any better off in regards to who the creator is and why they were created? In this knowledge, are they any better off on the Day of Judgment? Technically, no. Because you didn't tell them who Allah was. You didn't tell them why Allah created them, which is to worship Him. They didn't know who the Prophet ﷺ was as the final messenger. So them understanding certain things, certain niche, trivial things from their perspective about Islam is not going to help them. So our focus in the dawah should be, let's establish the fundamentals first. Right? Everything else comes later. Once you become Muslim, then those things become important. But until you become Muslim, those things are irrelevant for you. Don't worry about those things. And again, when we get to the go-wrap, we'll cover the technique on how to take any conversation, whatever someone comes to you with, and redirecting it to the foundations. Right? Inshallah, we'll cover this. So again, a very key point, something we need to keep in mind. Our duty is to convey, not to convert. Guidance comes from Allah. Right? Again, we get this confused sometimes. A lot of brothers go into it and they're very passionate and they want to get shahada, and when they do dawah practically, they realize, oh, not only am I not getting shahadas, but I'm getting refuted. People are laughing at me, people are rejecting what I'm saying, they think I'm stupid, and they get deflated and they stop doing dawah. Right? Because they went in with the wrong mindset. The mindset isn't to get shahadas, to ensure shahadas. We desire getting a shahada because we want the reward and we want guidance for people. But the dawah is not about ensuring someone becomes Muslim. That's not in our hands. Our job is to deliver the message clearly, with clarity, and give them what they really need. If we've done that, we've done dawah. We've been successful. Right? If they don't become Muslim, if they reject it, whatever happens, that's with Allah. Allah guides who He wills. We don't guide people. We're just tools. Allah is giving us the opportunity to just play a part in this whole puzzle so we can gain some rewards, inshallah. Right? So our focus should be convey the message clearly. Make sure you're doing justice to delivering the message. What happens is in the hands of Allah. Right? Because a lot of brothers get caught up, they do shahada tallies. I've had 100 shahadas, I've had 200 shahadas over the past year, I've had 300 shahadas. Okay, that's nice, but that's not the focus because it creates the wrong mindset. Even if you get no shahadas, it doesn't matter. Hypothetically, if you give dawah for 10 years, you get 0 shahadas, doesn't matter. There's no direct correlation is what I'm saying, between your dawah, effective dawah and shahadas. There's no direct correlation. There's no science here that if your dawah is effective, it should result in shahada. It doesn't work like that, right? The best dalil for this is Nuh alayhi salam. One of the best examples of this. How many years did Nuh alayhi salam give dawah for?
950.
950 years. We can't even imagine, you know. Us guys here, if we go back even 50 years, 60 years, we weren't even alive, right? We've probably been giving dawah for 5, 6 years, 2 years, 10 years, 950 years.
Only 50, 40 people.
There you go. You can count them on your hands, literally, right? Now think about this scenario: 950 years of dawah, only around 40 or so,
40 years.
depending on what the scholar says. A very small number. That's what we can say of people that accepted the message. Let me ask you guys a question: was Nuh alayhi salam successful in his mission?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So what does that tell us? Success in the dawah is not about shahadas. It's not about numbers. It's about delivering the message clearly and effectively. That's all we need to focus on, inshallah. Right?
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes, brother.
Is there a correlation between the reward you get and shahadas?
There may be a correlation. There may be an additional aspect. So say someone becomes Muslim and they start practicing Islam and you help them with that. Right? So then definitely there's more rewards. And we know if Allah guides one person, if someone comes to Islam through you, then there is a reward for that. But it's not to say that you're not being rewarded and you're not successful if you just give the da'wah properly, sincerely. Right? So even if you give da'wah, no one takes shahada, you're still being immensely rewarded for that role. And I'll give you another dalil for that specific scenario. Surah Yasin, you hear of a story of a man. Right? We don't know what the man's name is. Very interesting story. Allah doesn't name this person. It's very interesting because normally when we introduce people to each other, how do you introduce someone? What's the first thing you tell someone about someone? Their name. This is Sheikh so-and-so. This is brother so-and-so. Right? Name, identity is attached to name. Right? But in this case, Allah doesn't tell us the name of this person. This is a man. He comes rushing in from the furthest part of the city or town. And the scenario is that Allah sent 2 messengers to a community, and then He sent a 3rd messenger, and these 3 messengers are giving da'wah to the community. Right? Normally, how many messengers does Allah send to a people? 1, normally, right? Sometimes there's 2 there at the same time. Here is a unique scenario, there's 3 present. There's 3 messengers present giving da'wah, right? If there was ever a time in history where you can argue that it's not an obligation upon the community of Muslims to give da'wah, this was probably it, right? 3 messengers giving da'wah already. Now this man comes rushing in of his own accord, and he comes and does what? He says to his people, listen to the messengers, follow the messengers, right? So if I was to ask you, we to be specific, I'll give you 2 options. Is this man giving direct da'wah, or would you say he's supporting the da'wah? Which one would you say is more correct? He's supporting. He's just telling the people to follow the messengers, what they say. Okay? As far as we know, no one listened to it. Instead, what they did was they killed him. Right? Now, what's the next thing we have? Allah doesn't even tell us how they killed him. Right? So there's 2 pieces of information that's omitted: is who he was and how he was killed. But what Allah is getting us to focus in on is what he did, his action, which was to give da'wah, or support the da'wah to be more specific, and his reward. What was his reward? Yeah. When he's on the other side, he just wants his people to know how Allah has elevated it and honored him. Right? Now this is purely, here what we're learning is that just the immense rewards of just supporting the da'wah. Forget, not even not put shahadas aside, there's messengers already there. He gets killed in the process, but Allah honors him and elevates him. And as far as all we can guess, this person probably was a sinner all his life. Maybe accepted the message very recently. But look at the immense reward for him just giving that, supporting da'wah. So now we can just compare this to actually look at our time and our situation where we're giving direct da'wah. Even if no shahadas happen, imagine the immense rewards of that. We can't even begin to imagine. It's beyond our imagination as to how we could be rewarded potentially. Next key thing, or probably the most important thing, is it all revolves around this. This is the core. This is the core, brothers. If we can get this right, then all of the rewards we've been talking about, and all of the pleasure of Allah, all of that's there. But it all hinges on this. This is the hinge. If we don't get this right, it's destruction. Right? We're going to destroy ourselves. And I can tell you again from experience, I've known brothers that have come into the da'wah and completely burnt out. Right? Some have even in some cases eventually left Islam. You're going from someone that's not only Muslim but giving dawah to leaving Islam. Why? Because this was missing. They maybe started sincerely, but when they got involved in the dawah, because it was public facing, you know, the dawah is always public facing. Whether you're speaking to one person on the street or you're doing a video on YouTube, it's always public facing, right? It's not something you do privately, you know, like the night prayer between you and Allah. It's easy to have your sincerity right in those cases. But when you're doing something like the da'wah, your sincerity is going to be challenged. And it's going to be challenged from many different angles, right? One factor is, it's public. There's people always around, right? So that in itself makes it difficult to be sincere. The second element is shaitan. He's going to come after you like with a ton of bricks. He's going to hit you hard when you get involved in the da'wah. Why? What's his job till the day of judgment? Yeah, he's got one role, to misguide people, to take people off the straight path. When you get involved in the dawah, what are you going to start doing? Or try to do?
Sure.
Do what? You're going to be bringing people what? Off the path or onto the path? Onto the path. So now what you're doing is in direct contrast to what shaitan is doing. You know, now if he has any sense, who's he going to go after? 10 people, regular Muslims, just living their lives out, or that one Muslim that's actually involved in helping others come to the straight path? You're the biggest obstacle. You become one of the biggest obstacles for him. So he's going to come after you, and he's going to come after you hard. And this is why you have to stay on top of yourself. You know, you have to continue to work on yourself as well. Continue to remind yourself of why you're doing dawah. You're not doing it for fame. You're not doing it for popularity. You're not doing it for the money. You're not doing it for this, that, the other. You're doing this only to seek the pleasure of Allah, to attain His reward, you know, and all of these things. So sincerity is key. You know, sincerity is key. Now, just a quick note practically on how to do this. You know, how to try to work on your sincerity when it comes to the dawah. One of the things you can do and you should do is be conscious of your actions generally, right? But when you're going to do dawah, take some time to really sit down and think about why you're doing that particular action. So say you're going to do a dawah table, or you're going to do a masjid open day. Why are you doing it? Right? Ask yourself the question, because psychology, when you ask yourself questions, you will come up with the answers. But you have to take the time to do that. Why am I doing this? See what answers come to you. You know, check yourself. Am I doing this for the wrong reason? Remind yourself. If you do feel a bit like shaky, you feel like something's not right, remind yourself of who Allah is and who you are in the grand scheme of things. Right? Because our lives, if you think about it, 50, 60 years, they go by in a flash. Right? Where do we come from? What does Allah say? خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ نُطْفَةٍ. Right? This despised, dirty drop of fluid. And where do we go? We go into the dirt. Right? So we're sandwiched between two dirty states. Two types of dirt. That's our reality. We're nothing. Right? But here Allah is giving us an opportunity to attain immense reward, to build our akhirah. Literally build our akhirah. So why would we just give that up for a moment of this ego boost, or just feeling good, or showing off? It's pointless. You know, you're gonna feel that good feeling. You've showed off. People think I'm good. It's gonna last for a few minutes, a few hours. It's gone.
It's not worth it.
Yeah, it's not worth it, and your reward's gone as well. You know, if anything, now you're gonna be accounted for that. You know, so it's very dangerous. You have to stay on top of your sincerity. It's very, very important. Remind yourself of who Allah is. Remind yourself of who you are, what your reality is. You know, remind yourself of the opportunity. Remind yourself of the rewards. You know, and sit down. Biggest thing you can do is sit down and really think about these things a couple of minutes before, or even a day before, or an hour before you do your activities, inshallah. Very important. Knowledge and clarity. You know, there's a statement by Ali radiallahu anhu. He said, "Speak to the people according to their level of understanding. Do you wish that Allah and His Messenger be rejected?" This is a very powerful statement. You know, and it emphasizes the point about sometimes what happens, as you learn, say for example, Go Rap today, you know, and you want to go out there and you want to share this with people. But remember, curse of knowledge is one thing. They don't know this stuff. They're not used to terms, you know. You may be speaking to a very simple person. You may be speaking to someone that's just a bus driver, you know, just went to high school, never went to college, never went to university, right? Not that they're any less or better than anyone else, but they have a certain level of understanding. You know, so now if you start talking about deep philosophical, logical arguments, and you start talking about it, they're not going to understand what you're saying. You know, so you're not going to be communicating effectively with them. They're not going to understand the message. So speak to people on their level. If you're speaking to someone simple, keep it simple. And normally it's best to keep it simple. Say you're speaking to a professor, a university professor, then yeah, sure, you may want to step it up a bit and give a bit more, go into the sort of deep logic and stuff like this. But look at the level of the person you're speaking to. It's very, very important. Dawah is not based on ignorance, emotion, or unknowns. Have knowledge of what you convey. Right? Convey from me, again, even if it's one ayah, we looked at this earlier, the key thing here is knowledge. Speak about things you know. And keep learning. The dawah will also motivate you to learn more. And improve as well. Right? So another very interesting thing that happens in the dawah, which benefits us, is you may know something, but you may not be acting upon that thing. Right? But now when you go and, if someone asks you about this and you teach them about that thing that you don't act upon yourself, you're going to have this guilt. Right? So it's going to have a positive impact on you as well, because you're going to start practicing that thing. Right? So this is a powerful thing in and of itself, inshallah. So again, speak to people on their level and cover things or speak about things you know. Character, very important, brothers and sisters, very, very important. Remember, you are the delivery mechanism, brothers and sisters. Right? There's two parts of communication. Okay? There is the message and then there is the mechanism. Okay? We normally think of speech as just, okay, I need to tell someone something, you just go and tell them. Right? But we don't realize there's two parts of speech. There's the message and there's the mechanism. Okay? The message is what we're trying to convey, Islam. Right? The message of Tawheed. Clarity. We want it with clarity. But then there's the mechanism. You are the mechanism. You are that thing that the message is being delivered through. Right? And people, the way people are, is that has almost an equal impact on people, if not more so. Right? Say, for example, if I went to this brother right now, and I said to him, I love you, but at the same time I slapped him across the head. Right? And scenario number 2, I went to him, I said, I love you, and I hugged him. Which one is he going to understand? Second one. Right? Because you're delivering it, and you're now, through your own body language, the way you're delivering it is important as well. Right? I'll share a quick story with you. A sheikh shared a story with me once. It's a very funny story, but it has a very powerful impact on this, and it always reminds me of this. So hopefully, maybe this will help it stick in your minds as well. He said there was a very simple guy in a village, and one day he had an earache, had an ear infection. So he went to the doctor, and the doctor checked his ear, and he said, okay, you have an ear infection, I'm going to give you some antibiotics. Right? So the doctor said to him, look, take this 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, evening, and take it for 7 days, and you'll get better. Right? So the guy goes away with the antibiotics. Next morning, he comes back to the doctor, and he says, doctor, the pain is getting worse. So the doctor thought this guy's a simple village guy, he didn't understand. So he explains to him again, he says, look, take this 3 times a day, morning with breakfast, lunch, one with dinner, and take this for 7 days, and it'll get better. Right? So the guy goes away, guess what he does the 3rd day? Comes back to the doctor, he says, doctor, the pain is getting even worse now. Right? But now the doctor's thinking, well, it's been 3 days, normally the antibiotics start to kick in by day 3. And this guy's saying the pain's getting worse. What's going on? So the doctor looks inside his ear again, and guess what he finds inside his ear?
Okay.
He sees the pills, the antibiotics stuffed inside his ear. So what the guy was doing, he was taking the antibiotics, but he was sticking them right into his ear, right? As opposed to taking it orally, right? So the moral of the story is that the medicine is only effective if it's administered properly, right? Now, how does this apply to this? I'm sure you guys have connected the dots already. The point here is the message is only effective if it's delivered properly, right? So there's this direct relationship between the two. And most of us don't understand this, and this is why you see a lot of, again, I bring Speaker's Corner up as an example. Some of the brothers there know what they're talking about, right? The message, they have the message, but the way they're delivering it, it's not having the same impact, right? They're speaking down to people, they're aggressive, they're trying to, win the debate, they're coming across very sort of arrogant, and all of these traits, just human psychology, people don't appreciate these things. Even non-Muslims that watch those videos, they can be like, yeah, what they're saying makes sense, but look at their character, look at the way they're behaving. How can I take such a person seriously? Our lives are testament to this, Whenever there's someone that's been there in our life that's been very aggressive towards us, we want to keep our distance from that person. Even if that person knows all the truth in the world. But whenever someone's been loving towards us, we incline towards that person, even if they have very little knowledge. Right? So character is key in the dawah. Be conscious of this. Be gentle, be kind, be respectful. Don't speak down to people, speak to people on a level. Even if they're getting aggressive, know they're ignorant. They probably watched some documentary, read something online, and they've just become angry because of that. Assume that they're ignorant. In most cases they are. So take the higher ground. Try to calm them down. Try to get them to sit down if they can. That helps the process. And told us, if someone's angry, get them to sit down. Get them to sit down. Offer them a coffee. Offer them something. Relate to them. Say, I appreciate where you're coming from. I know you probably watched something, seen something, and I can see why you're so angry. And I would be too if I was in your position. But let me just clarify some things for you, because what you've been taught is not true. Right? And then you can start like this with them, right? Instead of just giving them the anger back and it becoming this argument and it's just going nowhere, right? So keep characteristics in mind. They're very, very important, inshallah. And again, just the last thing I'm going to cover with you guys before, again, this point emphasizes the useless, insincere debates, right? You don't want to get into useless, insincere debates. It's pointless. You're not benefiting yourself, you're not benefiting the person. One of the best evidences from the Quran again is if you look at the story of Musa and Fir'aun, Musa alayhi salam and Fir'aun. Musa alayhi salam, he was very strong in his personality, right? Fir'aun was one of the biggest, one could argue, the worst tyrants that's ever existed, the most evil of people that's ever existed, right? Now, when Allah sends Musa to Fir'aun, what advice does Allah give Musa alayhi salam? قولا لينا. What does that mean?
Soft speech.
Soft speech. It's very powerful if we think about this example. One of the best of human beings is being sent to one of the worst of human beings, and Allah is advising him to be soft and gentle in his approach. Right? We would think this guy needs to get beaten up, right, for what he's doing, yeah? But Allah is telling him, Musa was strong. Musa could have done some damage to Fir'aun, right? But Allah is telling Musa to be soft and gentle. Why? How does the ayah end, Sheikh?
Yeah.
How does the ayah end? Why?
Surah.
Yeah, but what does Allah say? So be soft and gentle in his speech. Why?
Yeah. فَقُولَ لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا لَعَلَّهُ يَتَذَكَّرُ أَوْ يَخْشَى. So
Yes.
he may come to truth and remind Allah and so on.
Absolutely. SubhanAllah. So Allah tells us why as well. Why is Allah telling him to be soft and gentle in his speech? So that this crazy guy, through your softness and your gentleness, his heart may soften and he may understand the truth. Right? Now, if the best of human beings has been sent to the worst of human beings and being told to be gentle and soft, and we've been told what the reason why that is the case, why we should be soft and gentle, then how should we be with the people out there? None of us are as good as Musa alayhi salam. Okay? And we can argue most people out there, majority of human beings, are not as bad as Pharaoh. There's some bad people out there, but they're probably not as bad as Pharaoh. So as a foundation, we should always be soft and gentle in our speech. Right? There's a place for arguments, there's a place for debates, right? But that's not in the majority cases on a street Dawah table or a mosque event. Maybe there's a debate that's been organized somewhere, and even then, even in debates, I would say, you can be assertive, but you don't have to be nasty and aggressive. Right? There's a way of conducting yourself in debates as well. Right? But generally, we're not debating with people, we're just delivering the message. So have the best of characteristics, brothers. Keep these things in mind, inshallah. This stuff is probably more important than the method you're going to learn today. Because if you have bad characteristics, bad manners, you speak about whatever, then even that method is not going to help you. Right? But if you have good characteristics and you have the right sincerity, then inshallah, not only this method, but any way of giving dawah is going to be effective, inshallah. So this is one method, it's an effective method, but don't see it as the only method, right? But it's one that we've tried and tested and it works really well. And just a point before Murtada starts, that sometimes you'll notice that you have to change strategy. You may speak to someone that's really emotional, that's probably lost a parent. You don't want to start talking about God's existence in a logical way. You may just want to go straight to the Quran first and give them something from the Quran, right? And when they relate to that, then maybe get to the Quran, right? So you have to be very wise with the way you use the tools we're going to cover now, inshallah. Right? We'll do Q&A at the end after Murtada finishes, inshallah. You guys can stretch out for 2 minutes if you want, inshallah, because I know you guys have been sitting.
Recorded, really good footage. Got you completely on.